Hello, and welcome back to yet another completely unprofessional interview. The only tabletop RPG interview show where knowledge isn't death, but the ham-fisted jokes are. So we are back again. There's the smile and recognition that I want. We are back again to do another interview here. This I'm going to consider part 2, the other side of the Black Company interview that I'm doing for the Black Company RPG. Some of you have seen, and thank you for watching. We did have an interview with Dennis Detwiller, whatever, a few weeks ago that many of you enjoyed. But we've kind of focused primarily on a lot of the aspects of the Black Company. A lot of the heart in talking about Glen Cook and his stories, but we didn't dive into the mechanics of the game that's going to be coming out for playtest really soon. So today, I have with me Mr. Shane Ivey. I pronounced Ivey correctly, so that's 1 point for me. But Shane, thank you so much for joining us here today.
You got Shane right, too. So you can take
Hey, American public school education. At least we can pronounce things correctly sometimes. But yes.
I'm glad to be with you, Scope.
Touche. No, it's wonderful to have you here today. And again, thank you so much for being here on a Saturday morning. For those who aren't aware of it, but yes, we're Saturday morning here. Shane's coming to us from lovely Canada, somewhere in the Great White North, and the weather has flipped. We're dealing with crazy weather now, and how's the weather there up in Canada?
Oh, it's all right. I'm looking out the window. It's sort of very gray and misty, and occasional rain coming around.
Okay.
It's sort of standard Southwest British Columbia weather at this point.
Oh, well, I mean, you've been there for a while now, so I assume that you've become acclimated to it. But you're an East Coast boy, right? Or are you West Coast? I forget.
Oh well, I moved all
Okay.
over. I mean, we're from Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
but I lived mostly in Arizona and Sacramento in California as a kid, and then moved back to Alabama for a few years, and then we got married and lived in New York for a while. Then we moved back to Alabama. We were there for a good long time raising the
Oh,
kids. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, as a California native, I'm intimately aware of Sacramento and the gas station that I stop to fill up as I pass through it and never think about it again.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, I lived there. I don't know, about 10 years in Sacramento.
okay.
Through my until I was about 19, I
Oh,
guess.
okay. So yeah, I mean, you've got a bit of California in you then. So Northern California, Southern California, we
Yeah,
have some
yeah,
differences,
Sacramento.
but
Yeah,
yeah, I don't really call Sacramento Northern. They'd like to be a part of it, but it's a different world as you head further east. But
it's sort of in between everything. Got the crazy pre-Oregon lunatic rednecks a little bit
mhm,
north, and then if you go south, it's wine country and everything's ridiculously beautiful and wealthy and rich.
yes,
Or
yeah.
San Francisco, real
Yeah.
California.
Oh, thank you. But we're dealing with the storms, and as that wonderful meme of the backyard dinette set says, we will rebuild here once we're done. So,
Right, right, right.
but
Yeah.
speaking of growing up, so indulge me and the people watching, if you will. One of the things I like to do in here is when I get someone on for the first time is to like to show a little bit of interest. We all come from a different background. We all have our different introductions into what got us into gaming and the hobby. And of course, I'm always interested in what a particular individual's entry point was. No matter if it's just D&D red box, or there's some people usually have a very interesting story that may lead into it. So what was yours? What got little Shane Ivey? There we go, Ivey. Shane Ivey into this hobby.
Yeah, so I was in, I think, fifth grade. This would have been 1979,
Okay.
and my best friend in school We were both big readers. I had discovered The Hobbit and Tolkien, and was just reading all of everything I could get my hands on. And then a buddy, my best friend, said that he had seen an ad for this game that was he thought it was some kind of a board game that you use little figures of knights and elves and things. And I said, "Oh, that sounds great. Let's find that." So we did a little bit of fifth grade investigating and found the first version of basic D&D, the Holmes version with the dragon on the cover, box set, and took that and just instantly became complete addicts, both of us. It was like if we were 10 years old, or 5 years older, and twigged us onto cocaine, it would have been like that. Um, but for good or for ill, it was D&D. So it was basically me and my friend Mike spent the next 2 years just nonstop every single day playing, one-on-one D&D, and then started roping some friends into it, that other kids around the neighborhood, um, into it, and just never quit.
That I mean, so were you one of the lucky ones? So obviously life progressed, and you met, Rachel, got married, had kids. Did you go through that period of downtime like some of us did, or were you lucky enough that they continued, from the inception onward and throughout?
Not for
Hmm.
long. I After college, I went to law school briefly, and I'd say for about a year and a half, I focused really hard on school and didn't have time to do
Right.
any games, and then got super bored and burnt out with school. So games won.
Ah. Oh, well, I mean, we you never really lose it. I mean, even when, I had my downtime, I was still, fulfilling it with video games or just, doing what
Yeah.
some people do, reading for fun. I had my down period through, well, the fourth edition iteration of D&D, and according to most people, I didn't miss out. But others will demand that you need to appreciate the whole package. But it wasn't just about D&D. So so just kind of touching briefly on yourself before we start talking about the Black Company, though. But for those who may not know you personally, you are part of Arc Dream Publishing, which
Mhm.
has a bit of a background to it, where it came from. The foundation of which was built, which discussed a bit with Dennis, and of course, if people are interested in this, you can, one of the great places to learn about it is Shannon Appleklein's Designer and Dragons, where they, you have a chapter devoted
Mhm.
to your guys's, various, waves and incarnations. But we do get a lot of people who are burgeoning game designers, people interested in the hobby that might, be interested in, briefly, like what the transition from this is fun, I love this gaming, to, well, I want to create something, and then, well, I want to create something, but I want to share it with people and possibly, turn this into a career. Was that a linear path, or did it just kind of, come in waves till eventually it led to where you are?
Yeah, it meandered a bit. Um, all that really all it came down to was, um, I'm a junkie, and so I do this stuff pretty much every waking moment
Hmm.
anyway. So I wonder if there's a way I can sell some of that,
Right.
you know, to become a dealer on top of it, keep my supply going. And yeah, and that kind of grew and grew and grew, right? So yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I was in law school and was looking to back then. I mean, when I was 22 or 23 or 24, whatever, I was really keen to be an FBI agent. This was in the
Oh,
years just after Silence of the Lambs and Twin Peaks, and there was a big glow on the bureau, and so but that wasn't going to work out because
Hmm.
in the real world, if you both um, took acid that one time a few years before, and you're too honest not to lie about it to the FBI job application,
Yes.
then things tend to fall apart. So
Right.
yeah, once that all came through, and I didn't get the credit I felt I was surely due for having been so honest about it
Mm-hmm.
all. Um, you know, there was a really rough transition of being both dirt poor and without a decent
Yeah.
job, and also having law school debts to pay without a law degree. Um, it was all really well thought out, carefully.
Well, you've
So yeah, I sort of jumped around a bunch of jobs, but in the meantime, I was corresponding a lot with the guys at Pagan
mm-hmm.
Publishing, John Tynes especially, and um, did some volunteer work for them, just proof play testing and
Right.
proofreading. I was a super fan essentially, and and yeah, and Dennis or John hired me. John hired me to run the Delta Green website
Mm-hmm.
for $50 a month, which, knowing their budgets, that was diamonds and jewels for those poor
Wow.
guys. But basically, I had a Delta Green fan site on Tripod or GeoCities or some nonsense. Um, but he liked the tone of it enough,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of he said he got the sense that I sort of seemed to instinctively get what they were going
Right.
for, you know, just in my fan site. So yeah, I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I'll do that. That sounds super. That sounds awesome. I'm part of the team. Anyway, it grew from there.
Yeah.
You know, I started getting jobs as an editor and as a writer, and in other fields. And then yeah, and then when Dennis and Greg Stolze got sufficiently frustrated dealing with the original publisher of their game Godlike, um, Dennis and I started talking. We'd been working together on some Delta Green
Right.
material, and you know, we're like, yeah, heck yeah, I've been I've been a magazine editor for a year and a half now. I know everything there is to know about publishing. Let's do it.
Oh, so you follow the late age school of podcasting approach, in regards to that, where
Right.
well, you
Enthusiasm inevitably leads one to success.
yes, yes, well,
Yeah.
that, but also you've heard it here first, everyone, that not only that, but the cartel school of business management also doesn't hurt. But it definitely can go one way or another with that. But and I'm sure that that's no surprise. I mean, you talking with other people and also reading and listening, and whether it be in interviews or one on one, a lot of the perception I get from a lot of people was, there's ones who just like, this is what I've wanted to do from day one, and they just put forth just all the effort and energy. And when you speak to people such as yourself and Dennis and other people, it's like, well, how did this happen? You're like, well, I mean, to be honest, it's something I really wanted, but it just kind of fell into place. There's no, really path that you can provide advice to you, as much as they want to say, Shane, what's the shortcut? Please tell me. I want to get there now rather than later. But
Yeah. I mean, main shortcut. I'll tell you the two most valuable
mhm,
shortcuts. One, three valuable shortcuts. One, um, be really, really good at some part of
mhm,
it or multiple parts of it without being able to explain how you're good at it or how you got good at it. Number two, have a spouse or significant other who's willing to support you entirely for, say, 10 to 15 years straight. And number three, be super lucky.
Oh, well, I mean,
All that together, and
yeah,
sooner or later, if you live long enough, you'll be
yeah.
golden.
It's you've just described my IT career. So
Yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, our dream, we're sort of, we're doing by tabletop role playing game publisher
mhm,
standards. We're doing fantastically well right
yes.
now, which is so fun.
Hmm.
Um, which is to say, we can afford to live and pay for houses,
Yeah.
which is, make house payments, which is way more than you could have said about us 10 years ago,
Yeah.
right? We went through about 10 years of, of just hardly making anything.
Hmm.
If one year I'd make $1,000, maybe three, four,
Yeah.
$5,000 in the salad days. And we just did other jobs on the
Right.
side, right? Dennis was his video game career in those days, and I was, I worked at newspapers and magazines, and worked for another a board game company that a friend of mine
Hmm.
ran, on the side for a while. We just sort of, I was just sort of doing odd jobs on top of um, running a by all accounts, struggling and failing role playing game company, you know,
Yeah.
and and then it started doing
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, it definitely is a testament, and it's how a lot of these things kind of fall into place. I mean, it's very rare do you see just like this was my first day, and then boom, everything explodes and lands into your lap. And but it's the it
Yeah,
endures.
there's like I said, there's no. I mean, I said it kind of half
Yeah.
jokingly, but there's no there's no overstating that this was possible
Hmm.
only because as we were raising
Yeah.
kids, Rachel was also happy to be
Hmm.
working and being responsible and, you know, living like a grown up, and also tolerating me, let's be
Yeah.
honest, not pulling my
Oh
weight
well.
for a long
Yeah.
time, you know? And that kind of faith and belief,
Hmm.
you know, you can't hope for it. So, yeah. So if anybody has any, is glad that Delta Green is doing as well as it is
Hmm.
now, it's entirely her doing because she facilitated and enabled me making bad choices for so long until they started paying money.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, now that you've said that, Rachel can leave the room. Um,
Right.
but no, I mean the small amount of time I spoke with both you and Rachel up in
Mhm.
Canada. She seems like absolutely wonderful and understanding of both sides of it. Through the period of time that she's been you know
Mhm.
uh, well, for lack of a better term, dealing with it and then becoming a part of it. So,
Right, right, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, she retired from her job right before we moved up
mm,
here, and so yeah, she's just for wanting something to do,
yeah,
right? Has pitched in for several years now, handling a bunch of things that before then I was supposed to handle and occasionally
mhm,
would, but usually would just sort of let
right.
slide because too much on my plate.
Well,
So
I mean, and that kind of presents itself. We won't get into it because that's not what we're here to talk about today. But also, you do have the addition of a Mr. Chris Spivey there to help out with those things. Which I don't know how far that was in or how far back that was in motion, but it took a few people pleasantly surprised. But it was like, oh my God, Chris Spivey is a part of Delta Green now, and then the resounding sound of applause following that. So I'm looking
yeah,
forward to
yeah, well deserved on his
yeah.
end. So yeah, it was just that fell into place really quickly, and it was just sort of um, I don't know about a fluke, but we sort of were at a point where it was almost coincidence, right? We were at a point where um, we recognized that um, I needed somebody or multiple somebodies to take on some of my
Right.
jobs, and and uh, and as we were sort of actively starting to look into that, um, Chris lost uh, his job with a research, a big research company with the government that was mainly doing scientific research. He was working as a program manager for them, but that job evaporated,
Oh, wow.
right? So I got in touch with them, and said, "Hey, how would you like to earn maybe a third of what you were earning before and work with us?" And he talked it over to his long-suffering wife, and
Yeah.
they'd make it happen. See how it goes.
Well, it's good to know because I follow Chris's posts. Primarily, he's primarily on Facebook, but I think he's on Blue Sky or something. But it's good to know that he doesn't have to go to low level Scotch. That Arc Dream is funding his appreciation of mid to high level Scotches. So you're keeping him
Yeah.
happy, which keeps everyone else happy. So
Right, right. Yeah.
so
Gotta prioritize.
So so let's get into it. So we're here today to talk about the Black Company RPG, and one of the focusing on primarily a lot of the system and the rules design that accompanies this game. There was a bit of history about how this came about that Dennis indulged me and the people watching in regards, and how pretty much the red carpet was laid out for Glen Cook in presenting the game, and essentially how his contribution, how much he's involved, and likewise the amount of creative aspects that's been applied to you, but also knowing that both you and the rest of Arc Dream involved in this project are in maintaining the integrity of these well loved books. Now, in conversations with a lot of people, one of the things that I have found is there's a majority of people who are well aware of the Black Company stories and books themselves, but not a lot of the people in the hobby are as well read regarding them. I mean, they're a bit of older books, as you well know, coming out in the early '80s, I believe, and most of them have a general idea, but it's rare when I see someone such as yourself or Dennis or other people who are trying to get involved in the game that I'm going to be running for them that are just like, oh my god, the Black Company, Kevin McAllister's Scream. I can't wait for it.
Right.
But the general appeal of it is a fantasy world, like so many others that there's no shortage of. But there's a different thing about it. There's an appeal to it, that the stories and how they're presented. The actual fantasy world is kind of a backdrop. The real stories are about the mercenary life. The life of a soldier. Their interactions between the battles that they're fighting for, that they're being paid to fight for, that is very grounded in their presentation, which coming into a role playing game, something such as that, especially with so many years of D&D-ish type fantasy role playing games, especially with 5th edition and how it's presenting how fantasy games should be played, the decision to jump into this was this something that was more was the decision based on this is an opportunity for us to work with a setting and an author and a world that we love, knowing that it may not appeal generally speaking, or was one of the goals when you first started going into this was to make this world that you both enjoy more broadly appealing to it, and then we'll go into like how the rules may be presented in regards to that. So,
Yeah, I mean both.
mhm.
It was So when we formed Arcstream Publishing in the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, 2003, I still have archived emails that Dennis and I were sending back and forth, saying, hey, if Godlike starts moving, why don't we reach out to Glen Cook
Okay.
and see if we can do a Black Company game? Right at that time, our friends at Green Renine
Right.
were already talking to Glen Cook
Mhm.
about adapting the Black Company. Their game, their book, they published in 2004, I think. So that was the Black Company campaign setting for third edition
Yep.
D&D, right? Prior to 3.5 and everything else even. Um, and I pitched in a little bit on that. It was mainly Rob Schwab and Owen Casey Stevens
Okay.
that were the designers of that for Green Ronin. I pitched in a little bit on the research side, but but that was mainly their thing. And so that came out, and then meanwhile, um, we had the aforementioned many years of not making much money for our Arc Dreams side,
Right.
right? So the last couple of years, Delta Green sales have been going up and up, right? Which is great. That also that gave us the flexibility to say, what if we wanted to invest in something new, right? In a kind of a daydream kind of a project.
Mhm.
And I just basically did a bunch of math and said, okay, so worst case scenario, we spend X amount of money on an advance for royalties for Cook. We spend Y amount of money on art and design and things that we need other people besides me and Dennis to do, graphic design. And then Dennis and I just sink a whole lot of hours into it on our own. And um, and then we get nothing back from all that. How'd we be doing?
Mhm.
And the answer was that would suck, but so we said, okay, well, let's give that a shot then. So we reached out to Glen and to Glen's agent and worked it all out. Yeah. So our goal is certainly we have kind of two audiences that we're trying to reach. Oh, really, two core audiences. One of them is fans of the fiction
Right.
who may not be too involved in role playing games. There's usually a pretty good amount of overlap because fans of the Black Company tend to be your hardcore swords and sorcery people who are frequently exposed to role playing games in one way or another. But we want to reach the fans of the fiction who, even if they're not crazy about role playing games, might get a kick out of seeing a really well illustrated, well put together book
Right.
showing that world in new ways that they haven't had a chance to see. Showing portraits of the characters created with um, as much attention to detail, to the details that we can glean out of the fiction as possible by artists that the best artists that we can afford, who might be interested in seeing different versions of maps of the world, right? Which are really hard to put together because Glen Cook does not like putting maps of his worlds in his books. That's a deliberate choice he's always made, and because he doesn't want to be roped into, well, this map has had this city here for all this time, but I want to have a story about it where it's over here.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so we want to, on the one hand, appeal to them, right? Fans of the books, fans of swords and sorcery, who want to see the Black Company setting in a new way, and then also we want to apply to role players who um, might be interested in this particular spin on swords and sorcery games,
Yeah.
right? This particular spin, meaning, ultimately, how will be our elevator pitch is going to be, um, it's the Delta Green team doing fantasy, right?
Right.
So if and if you don't know what that means, then basically ask somebody and they'll tell you, right,
Right.
what Delta Green is all about. But yeah, the less arrogant way to say that is we've spent a lot of time devoting our talents to horror, to suspense, to role playing games that um, deal heavily in consequences
Mm-hmm.
for the heroes, and in and we have no interest whatsoever in power fantasy.
Right.
Right? We are not remotely interested in putting adventures on the table that um, that are there to make you as a player do nothing but go, fuck yeah, I'm awesome. My character's a
Yeah.
badass. Everything's great. Um, there's plenty of games that'll do that,
Yeah.
right? It's not us. Um, we want to give you a chance to go, fuck yeah, I'm awesome, and then immediately see all of the downsides and say, oh shit, I forgot about that guy that was behind me. Does
Right.
somebody good at first aid that can save me from dying now? Right? So,
Yeah.
um, apologies if I wind up swearing way too much through your
No,
channel.
no, no, no. This is my fucking channel. Do whatever the fuck you want. So,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, but yeah. So what we want out of this is we want to be able to present a role playing
mhm.
game that has the level of unpredictability and suspense and sense of danger,
Right.
right? That you get out of um, the Black Company novels, within that world where there's magic and there's sorcery, right? There's all these fantastic things that are out there, but there's consequences,
Right.
right? You don't become an awesome sorcerer without giving up an awful lot of your humanity. Um, you don't become a middling, crappy sorcerer without also making yourself vulnerable to um, really dangerous forces if you come near them,
Right.
right? So, um, in Delta Green, in the Unspeakable Oath, I don't know. I think John Tynes or Scott Glancy, I don't know which of them originally, made the analogy that the Cthulhu mythos, the supernatural side of the game,
Right.
is is like mental plutonium. You come near it and it's infectious, it's dangerous by its very nature, right? And so the game itself is about your characters seeking that out and trying to handle it in some way that you can put it away and keep everybody else from getting damaged by it.
Hmm.
um, a lot of that bleeds over really easily into the Black Company,
Yes.
where there's magic and there's sorcery, but it's dangerous. And most of your characters, your player characters, are just ordinary human soldiers who don't have the benefit of um, hundreds of hit points and special powers, right?
Right.
Who have to be really careful if they get in a fight to not get stabbed with a knife. Um, And then, oh, also, by the way, now your job is to go deal with this sorcerer who's incredibly powerful and who, you know, might be able to explode your head with a glance and a wave of his hands.
Right.
You know,
That's
good luck with that.
uh,
Give me the. We'll talk. We'll see how it goes in the debriefing.
so. So that's a lot to present. That's a lot to expect. And so the path you followed. And for those who are not aware, I was fortunate enough to sit down up in Canada at CamCon and play one of the play tests with you, and I've you gave me a copy of the playtest booklet at the time, read through it, coordinated with some people to have a playtest myself. Of course, that's still on the
Oh,
on the
cool.
calendar,
Mm-hmm.
but no shortage of excitement. And I've gone over some of the rules with other people, but so the rules, the backbone, the structure of this game, so these rules want to represent everything that you just described here and more. So the general expectation that I feel some people might have is so Delta Green. There's no hiding that Delta Green is kind of built upon the chassis of BRP, with
Mm-hmm.
and has been modified in its own right to become it's something of its own. But BRP being what it is, if BRP is utilized in other aspects other than Call of Cthulhu, it's let's put a car wrap over it, change a couple skills, and here you go. But you didn't do that with Black Company. The Black Company system, we'll go into some details as we talk, uh, is its own thing. At least for the most part, what I can tell now. Again, was that something that was a something that you and Dennis and the others set out to do initially? That this needs to be its own thing, or were there challenges that presented itself and then it evolved into what it is, and then of course what it's becoming as you go through the playtest? Because um, the the what is the word I'm looking for? Um, I guess did Black Company, as you were going through this, did you realize that this needs its own mechanical backbone as you were sitting down and starting putting pen to paper, or did you set out knowing that no, we're throwing everything out the window and we're going to do something new?
Well, yeah. I mean, it certainly we certainly felt like it needed to have to be um, its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the uh, If you try to shoehorn what the Black Company fiction tries to do to an existing rules set of games, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's D&D or RuneQuest or Delta Green or whatever, it's not going to do that, right? You're going to get something that sort of goes more or less in the direction towards what the fiction does, but is not going to really feel much like the fiction when you're playing the game.
Right.
And that's what we want. We want the game to, as close as we can manage it, um, give you the feeling of how events go in the books and in the stories, and that when you come to it from reading those stories, you have an expectation of what the events are going to be like, what price the characters might pay, how dangerous it might be. Um, and we want the game to deliver that when you start playing. Okay. Um, so it definitely, all we knew, it always knew it needed to be its own thing, right? Whatever fundamental rules chassis we build it on.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through a few, we experimented a lot in the early days, when we first got the license, before we even got the license, we were tinkering, getting that, bouncing ideas around, and I went through a long period of play testing different versions of the rules that were entirely different. And before we kind of started honing in on the shape it's in right now. So yeah, so it kind of we definitely wanted it to be its own thing because we had a very specific experience that we want to deliver. Right. If you make it a D&D setting, you're going to be playing the experience. You're going to have the experience of playing D&D characters with a light gloss of, one of the wizards is named Soulcatcher, but it's, whatever, still a 26 level sorcerer or what
comparably,
or whatever, and it won't feel right,
right?
Because the novels and the stories, they have a physics about them, so to speak,
very much so,
that few games want to deliver. Right? They have a fear to them when you start putting characters in danger that role-playing games, for the most part, tend to shy away from. When you have a character that's very experienced, part of the deal in most role-playing games is you play the character successfully, the character gets more resilient, gets tougher, and gets more able to tolerate danger, right? They're less at risk of being knocked out of play.
Right.
Okay. Which is a fair expectation, right? Because you've put a lot of energy into playing this character and a lot of time, and it's become a part of you, and you lose access to that character, and suddenly, oh my God, you feel gutted sometimes. So that's part of the deal, right? And in D&D, it's become more and more and more a part of the deal as the editions have gone along. We don't want to deliver that. What we want to deliver is if you play a character and that character survives for a long time, in really dangerous circumstances, you feel lucky and you feel like you didn't earn that, in the same way that every veteran of real combat that I've read accounts of, spoken to, heard from, whatever. The most common response to, wow, you came through all that, you must be a real hero, real badass, is just sort of a shrug. Right? Saying, it wasn't really any doing of mine. And I mean, Dick Winters from the 101st in World War II, right? Band of Brothers, right? This really brilliant combat leader and commander, absolutely beloved by his troops. And somebody asked, he had this super famous quote where somebody said, do you people call you a hero? I think very rightly. How does that feel? And his response was something along the lines of, I don't feel like a hero. I'm not a hero, but I served with a lot of them. We want you to feel that sense of, if you survive combat, right? Even if you come out of it and your character is the type to brag about it and act and puff himself up and act like a big badass and awesome and everything, as a player, right, that's just because the dice were nice to you.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very reflective in how the game is, and some of the major, I wouldn't say major, but some of the changes that are different than how, well, I guess I'll keep referencing Delta Green, but other role playing games is one of the big key things. This is for the most part, other than a couple things here or there, this is all player side roles, which is interesting. And I may be, excuse me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but to me, that having that player side role seems to still follow this, this philosophy, this intention of what is being presented in the game. That this is the experiences of the soldier itself, and these player side roles are being done, for you to, the determining outcome of what happens to you isn't between you and the GM. It's determined by the player's decision. And luck plays a huge part within the game, which is an interesting thing. Also, that was a bit of a pleasant surprise to me. The luck is not just a 50-50 flip of the coin, but luck within this system is also used for particular resolutions with NPCs, if I'm not mistaken, surviving death spirals and things such as that. So, like you said, the general outcome of what happens within these type of people, like, these men who fought in World War II, these band of brothers, these soldiers, a majority of why they came home is not because of their training, their skill, their grit. It was luck. A lot of them would just say, I am just lucky to be here. So again, that experience that's presented in Glen's books is coming through to the system. But likewise, the player characters, as you said, these aren't zero levels. They're not, leaving the farm to go fight a war. You start as hardened veterans. You are, hardened soldiers. Not necessarily veterans, but you are a hardened soldier. You've seen shit. You've experienced things much like within the game.
The Black Company organization doesn't hire newbies.
Right.
That's what makes the Black Company itself so formidable.
Yeah.
Is it only looks for experienced soldiers and people who have proven themselves capable fighters and somewhat reliable, and so you're playing characters who, by compare, that everybody else would look at and think, that's a tough guy, that's a badass right there.
Yeah.
And if your character gets in a one-on-one fight with some poor chump levy who's been pulled off a farm and given a spear and said, go fight those guys that have all the armor, you're probably going to win, and look awesome doing it. But
sorry, go ahead.
Sooner or later, there might be a crossbow bolt coming your way.
Right. No, it's true, because, and witness that at the table in Canada. But so the system, so only players roll the dice for the most part. I mean, there's nothing that's absolute. Every once in a while, the GM rolls for some sort of decision-making process. But anyways, the primary narrative of the game structure is player side rolls. You're rolling for yourself. You're rolling for, outcomes within NPCs, hardened veterans. But another interesting aspect I found is it, and I know that this applies in Delta Green. There's a quote in there, when helping handlers, hey, only roll when necessary. But here, not only do you only want to roll if necessary, it's because every roll has a particular consequence that is listed or meant to have some sort of particular outcome within the game, which is another really interesting creative aspect to it. Is there something that inspired to expand on the only roll if necessary to make it part of the mechanical infrastructure? And yep, go ahead.
Yeah. So putting the pardon me if you hear my dog out being on the other side of the door barking at me. So there's a couple of things. Setting it up so that only the players are rolling the dice does a couple of different things. One thing is it kind of frees up the GM to focus on um, the imaginative side, the interpretive side
Right.
of how things are going to go, and to concentrate on the uh, costs and the consequences of those roles. As you say, that's an integral part of the way we're presenting
Mhm.
the skills in the game. Um, it also kind of, I think, reinforces in a really intuitive way this sense that um, what's about to happen to your character, you brought this on.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Right? This isn't the GM rolling an attack roll from some stranger or whatever. If you get in a fight and you don't go to the trouble of tilting the odds entirely in your favor, then you roll the dice. You roll for you. What the way it works is, instead of the GM making an attack roll, you make your weapons roll to defend
Right.
yourself, right? And if you succeed, then good job, you're not hurt. And if you fail, then let's see how good your armor is. Um, but it kind of I think it kind of reinforces in a fairly grim way that sense of you know choice and consequence.
Right.
Yeah, and so the other side of that is adding is yeah, it very explicitly says, on the one hand, every time you make a skill roll, there should be a cost to the
Yes.
attempt, right? You're not rolling dice. I mean, you can roll dice just for the fun of
Right.
it, or the GM needs I mean, there's always going to be times that the GM needs a sort of a
Right.
nudge to get to jumpstart their imagination, and might say, I don't know, roll dice. Let's see, make a luck roll, whatever. Okay, but the core of it is, um, if the GM says, okay, we're going to test your skill here,
Mhm.
that's because number one, you're rolling the dice because you're trying to achieve something that an ordinary person probably could not
Right.
achieve. Okay, um, and you're doing that because there's something that you need to attain or whatever. um, but it always has a cost, whether it's time or just the risk of what might happen if you blow it, or or whatever.
Yeah.
um, and then if you fail, then there's the consequence of what happens if you fail, right?
Right.
um, Not only did you spend all that time and energy just getting the chance to roll the test,
Mhm.
um, but excuse me, um, but the GM has this laundry list of suggested consequences to choose one, flesh it out in play, and then turn that into an ingredient for some later encounter or event or something. Um, so yeah, it's 100% about, um, your soldiers are making life and death decisions, and that matters.
Yeah. No, it drives it home for sure.
Yeah.
It's
And I'm sorry, where that came
oh yeah.
from specifically is, yeah, I mean, we've got decades of experience running games along, using percentile
Yeah.
dice, um, and running games where you say, okay, I need I need you to make make an alertness
Mhm.
roll. The guy rolls, oh, I blew it, and then everybody else around the table
Yeah.
says, oh, can I roll?
Right.
And everybody rolls their dice, and that means, and you're inevitably going to get a success,
Sure.
right? Because let's say they each have a 50-50 chance.
Yeah.
You get four people rolling that 50-50 chance, your chance of a failure suddenly, whatever, you get the idea. It gets vanishingly small, in which case, why did I bother asking for a roll of the dice in the first
Yeah.
place?
No.
Um, which devalues the experience of that randomness that you've introduced. It devalues the sense of of suspense that you get, that's very
Yeah.
powerful if you're just flipping a coin, right? If you're flipping a coin, heads I win, tails I lose, right? Okay, well that's pretty brutal.
Hmm.
Um, if you flip the coin and you lose only if you get heads 4 times in a row, that's that's a little less interesting, you
Sure.
know.
Yeah, 2 out of 3. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to. Um, that's why I sort of framed it in that way to say, um, you know, yeah, if your buddy blows it,
Hmm.
right, you want to step in, you can, but you've got your own consequences that are going to pile onto that if you blow it too,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you can do that, but it's going to, the risks go up as well.
Absolutely. So we've got hardened veterans. We've got living within a dark fantasy world.
Mhm.
Magic, as we know right now, is extremely violent, extremely powerful, and very few people have the capacity to wield it and live long. And we've got player characters who essentially
Uh,
are living.
let,
Yeah.
let me, I'm sorry to
No, go
interrupt you
ahead.
there, but let me, just so that the Black Company purists don't
Oh
feel
yeah,
like
no,
we're
please
going
do. I
in
don't want
the
that.
wrong direction
Yeah.
here. Yeah, yeah, no, it's the magic, the way you get away with using magic
Hmm.
safely game, as in the
Right.
novels, is you use magic that's kind of weak
Mundane. Yeah.
and that tricks
Yeah.
people, right? You can do stuff that's just sort of illusory, that has little surface effects, that doesn't really have much of an
Right.
effect. You can if you're a in the weeds, goblin or one
Hmm.
eye type wizard, you can do that stuff all day
Right.
long. You'll be
Yeah.
okay. It's not a big deal. If you try to actually do something that changes the world in any real
Hmm.
way, that requires a lot more
Yeah.
energy, and therefore, if you're just a chump like one of them, a lot more effort and work,
Right.
and that raises the risks exponentially.
Right.
So sorry to
Oh
interrupt you
no.
there, but I want to make sure that everybody
Yeah.
understands that one of the fun things about the novels, right? Especially, you read that first
Hmm.
book and it's filled with all of these great, super fun exchanges between these rival
Yeah.
wizards where they just do illusions, making fun of each other constantly, right? And insulting each other, and it's hilarious. They're just burning off
Yeah.
steam, and we want to make sure that is in there as a
Oh,
possibility.
absolutely, and it
Well,
is,
right.
and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So all of this, is culminating, heading towards another big aspect of the game that's presented itself, and that is the aspect of stress. Now, stress is
Mhm.
nothing new in RPGs. It's
Sure.
utilized several different ways for several different means, but stress within the Black Company is a constant. You, as these soldiers, you are constantly battling, this stress mechanic, moving it, along, a scale, and with various ways uh, to engage, to earn this stress. A lot of it action orientated, action driven, um, but it's not just fear. It leads to other things. Dealing with morale, misery, betrayal, all of these things. Um, and so, but it plays a huge part. So I just so I'm not this to me this is a big part of it. So just so I'm not just going to describe it incorrectly, can you give us a bit of breakdown on how the stress system works within the game?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the essence of it is that, if your character is exposed to something that's traumatic or deeply frustrating, um, or whatever, then you get a stress level, right? And the stress levels are all, we wanted to get away from making everything numerical, so
Hmm.
they're just different layers that are described by adjectives. So your first step is you become anxious,
Right.
right? Which is there for you to have a descriptive tag, you know? So the GM can say, how's your stress,
Yeah.
right? You're not going to say, I only have 3 points,
Right.
right? You can just say, I'm anxious. Okay, fine, Then, I mean, if I'm your GM, then I'm going to do something annoying, like say, yeah, what does that look like for your character, right? But you have a tag
Right.
to work from. If something happens that you get even more stress on top of that, then you become whatever's the next level, distraught maybe. But they go up and up, and they start giving you penalties to your actions as they go.
Right.
Each level of stress is significant. That first level you get where you're only anxious, it doesn't have any penalties, but that's your warning, right? It gets any worse, and you're going to start having problems. Yeah, so you have a relatively, I think there's maybe 6 stress levels, but that means there's only, you start with at number 1, you can get 2 or 3, and you're still doing a pretty good job of coping with the world, probably. But more than that, and you start falling apart.
Right.
You go too far, you fall apart permanently. And
Yeah.
what that looks like depends entirely on how dark your GM and
Right.
is willing to get, within the knowledge of there's shit that the players don't want to see at the table, right? But it's a permanent thing,
Sure.
that your character who's been this awesome hero up till now is just broken now and is going to wander off and, just be on the streets, or getting in fights that are so suicidal that you're inevitably going to get killed, or,
Right.
or just commit suicide if you want to get really dark. I mean, that happens plenty to soldiers who too much happens to them too fast and they can't cope.
Well,
and it sucks and it's horrible. But
sorry,
we want to make sure that violence for these characters sucks and is horrible. Because that's part of the suspense for us.
But it's also interesting that you brought up getting into fights, of someone who might be broken or lost, but there's ways to combat this stress, and that's indulging these flaws of sorts, that again reflects what many of us of an older age may remember is what was done during Band of Brothers. This drinking, complaining, gambling, but also engaging in brutality. Putting the stress onto others in order to make yourself feel better. And I found at the table that I play with you, it's not only is narrative entertainment wise, but it's interesting to see people kind of rack their brains and kind of go inward a little bit to try to find these interesting ways that they're that they wouldn't necessarily be doing themselves, hopefully, to remove stress, but they're presenting these ideas, and while they are entertaining at the table, but they can be very disconcerting in some of the applications, because everyone always has that one experience at the table when you have that one person where the GM goes, okay, well, you rolled a critical roll, so how do you put the goblin down? And you get a 5-page narrative of something that's going to leave you in a sweat, of like, Billy, can I get a ride home with someone else? But no, but it's again, and I know I'm going to keep steering the ship back to this, but it is reflective of the world that you're presenting. So that's another thing that that I feel does an excellent job in kind of carrying the weight of all.
Good. No, that was a key. That's a key goal in in the game is making sure that when you have your character out there taking risks and doing awesome heroic things, that that there's a price for that heroism, just as we see in the novels. And the novels were inspired by Cook's experiences, serving in the Vietnam era with he was in the Navy, but he was in forward observer training with
Right.
Marines, with Force Recon Marines who were in the thick of the worst, right? Um, so that's a key thing for us is we want it to feel like you're playing these characters, you have the opportunity to be awesome and to be heroic and super brave and dangerous, but there's a price for that,
Yeah.
and that's going to wind up disturbing and distressing your character even if nobody else sees it. And the other side of that is, how do you cope?
Right.
Right? And so we want to provide lots of opportunities for players to proactively pursue behaviors for their characters that'll help their characters cope with all of this stress and tension. Um, and then give the players the chance to say, are you going to do stuff you know, that's kind of funny and hilarious? You're relieving stress by just bitching and moaning the whole
Yeah.
time until everybody else gets sick of you. Or you go off and just get drunk on your own instead of showing up on time to your assignment. Or when everybody else says, okay, everybody has our job here. This is really crucial. Don't let these guys get past you without you spotting them. And then you're saying, okay, well, my guy's at, like one away from broken, so fuck that. I'm gonna go, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to the tavern and gambling and getting
Yeah.
drunk and, looking for women.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so it's like, yeah, okay, right on. So your stress goes down a step or two. Good job. Everybody else, nobody sees that guy you were hunting. Who knows? You know. But yeah. I mean, all of these experiences that feel sort of
Mhm.
integral to the fiction, and coming out of the fiction to all of our long
Yeah.
experience, reading about the way that war affects
Mhm.
people. We want all of that to kind of come
Yeah.
forward, and give players lots of ideas and inspiration and nudges for bringing that to life, because not everybody has spent, unfortunately, the last 20 years reading war memoirs and psychological studies of veterans coming home from combat.
Well, you
And
you you did it so we don't have to. Uh,
exactly.
um,
But that's the reason for the
yeah.
game,
Right.
right? And that's the reason we want to do these kinds of
Yeah.
games is to put those things out there so that players can draw from them,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and it feels interesting and it feels somewhat
Well,
real.
that's a point I was just going to make. So a lot of these aspects these de-stress mechanics, a lot of role playing games save that for downtime, or a sidebar. But within here, some of it can actually be done in real time. The character that I was playing in the game that you were running, we were heading down into some cavernous hole where we could barely see a few feet in front of us. It was compact, tight. We had no idea what we were getting into, and the stress level of my character was high. So I figured, well, now's a good time for me to complain about the previous platoon that I used to be a part of, who we were in the same situation, and they ended up dead, and that's why I'm here. And so through that sort of narrative interaction within the game in real time, because right after that we hit the who we were looking for and gotten ourselves into a combat situation, that saved my ass of just sitting there and
Mhm.
bitching. Now the others, they didn't want to fucking listen to it, but too goddamn bad. I want to get this off my chest before we potentially go die. So that
Right.
was the approach.
You're blowing off
Yeah.
steam, and what makes the team a
Yeah.
team is other people are willing to put up with it, even though it kind of rubs their nerves a little raw. And in play, that work the rules side of that is really
Mm-hmm.
simple, right? Of that particular thing, is you want to lose a stress
Yeah.
point. Does anybody at the table willing to gain a stress point on my behalf? And
Yeah.
if somebody volunteers and says, I'll tolerate it,
Right.
then okay, start bitching and moaning, and here's your chance to sort of describe how you're putting up with all of that bitching and moaning and not giving in to the temptation to just let him have it, and tell him to shut the hell up because he's stressing you
Yeah.
out.
No, it's
So you lose a point, they gain a point. But if they can tolerate that extra level and it saves your ass from getting all kinds of horrible penalties, then that's
yeah.
worth it for
It
everybody.
it highlights, and again, a point of the books, even though the books do branch out into individual aspects,
Mhm.
but it does highlight the aspect of the company as a whole and the company discipline and cohesion over individual aspects. So I mean, the cohesive aspect of the company, generally speaking, is more important than the individual, but it's the individuals that keep the cohesiveness together, and that's done between mutual give and take. And that's again is reflective in here, not just in dealing with stress, and trauma, or we didn't speak about trauma, but stress and trauma is part of the game also. That, but trauma tests, if I'm not mistaken, they do rely on different skills within the system. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
and so, which was there for this particular aspect? Was there a bit of reasoning for breaking down these particular profiles rather than just a universal check for this thing?
Yeah. So the on the mechanical
Mm-hmm.
side, it struck me as more interesting and more
Okay.
suspenseful. That's my byword.
Right.
I love anything that makes a game that makes a player at the game feel a little bit
Mm-hmm.
nervous about what might happen. That's like silver and gold for me. So it struck me. It certainly struck me that it would be a little more interesting that if we have multiple ways of getting stress, that you have multiple ways of resisting stress. So sinking all of your skill points, into power so that you have an awesome
Right.
willpower. Um, that'll help in some avenues, but it's not a cure-all,
Okay.
right? Um, and that's kind of a departure because in Delta Green, of course, and in Call of Cthulhu for it, right? You have your sanity score, which is your sort of universal reaction to trauma of any kind and fear and terror. That's derived from your power stat, right? Um, and it all comes from the one
Right.
place. In Delta Green, we we put a little bit of spin on that by having different kinds of sanity loss, but it still all comes from the same
Right.
sanity score. Here, this presented an opportunity to take a lot of lessons from years of Delta
Mm-hmm.
Green, pardon me, and apply them in ways that uh, fit a lot of the research that we've done
Right.
over the years in how trauma affects people and in how resilience is not just it is a thing with shades. It comes from different places.
Yeah.
So yeah, so in the game, I mean, if I remember right, the you have if you're facing, you may have the rules right in front of you. If you're facing something that's just terrifying, right? Then you roll your power
Hmm.
skill to withstand that. Um, if you are, if you're facing a source of trauma based on having to do something really that you feel bad about, you know, you can roll your discipline skill to withstand
Right.
that. If you're getting trauma because you were betrayed, because somebody above you is mistreating you, you know, um, moral injury is what it's called. In the last couple of decades, uh, that's not a matter of
No.
stubbornness. So can roll your insight skill to process that in a way that lets you withstand that trauma and not have it come out as debilitating stress. So
Hmm.
you have these sort of three avenues
Right.
of attack that the GM can use to fuck with your character, right? And some characters are better at coping than with some of them than others.
Right. Yeah. Now again, just the compounding aspect that is involved with these soldiers as they're playing through this game. The one thing that kind of stood out in talking with a friend who I shared the PDF with that he's going to be playing in the game, reading through it is, and this also reflected itself in the game that you ran is to me it comes off as one of those games where unless someone is just completely checked out, you're not going to have anyone who is just going to be sitting there on their phone while one person is in the spotlight. This is several moving parts. The whole table is moving cohesively as a team, and so there's enough here to keep everyone engaged as they're moving through it, and
Good,
it
yeah.
definitely seems like it does it well, as opposed to other games where the spotlight just moves around the table one to one, and occasionally there's the whole group. This one, the
Mhm.
spotlight seems to be on everybody for the most part through the entire engagement, um, which eventually leads to what I want to talk about next is the big thing. The 500-pound gorilla in the room is these are mercenaries. It's a violent world that they're maneuvering through. Combat is inevitable, and the combat system itself, uh, straightforward. One attack test, one defense test, consequences. Initiative is it's a uh, uh, group initiative, and I'm not using the
Mhm.
right term. There's a specific term for it, but the initiative itself uh, relies on a group soldiering test, right?
Yeah.
And so again, cohesion over individual, heroics, but there's no shortage of what you would expect in combat. Actions. There's the I'm not going to say typical, but there are the expected list of actions within the game. But then you come down to something that seems new and different to me, and that's gambits.
Mm.
Can you enlighten those watching what gambits are and why you felt these particular things? Now I love them, but why you felt that this wasn't needed to be a necessary addition to what for the most part is just other actions that are come to expect from this type of game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the you can so in a play,
Hmm.
right? It's your turn, your soldier's
Right.
turn. Okay. You can say, okay, I'm going to attack somebody, right? Or instead of your attack being your action, you can say, oh, I've got to sprint over there. I've got to cover a lot of ground or whatever. So gambit is an action that you can take that has a list of possible effects. I'll tell you exactly where that came
Hmm.
from is in the fiction in one of, and this is sort of mild spoilers, but in the first novel of the Black Company,
Right.
right? There's this critical scene where Croker, the narrator, who's a doctor, he's not like a special forces guy. um, he and a buddy of his, Raven, who is a super dangerous, total badass, but also kind of a psychopath that nobody really trusts him all that much. The two of them have a job where they have to ambush these two sorcerers, and they're two of the most famously dangerous sorcerers in the world. And the two soldiers both know that if a single thing goes wrong, they're dead, right? It's almost a suicide mission, is the way they look at it. So they start they launch their ambush, and again, spoilers, scrub forward 5 minutes, whatever, if you haven't read the book. But the way he describes it is, they loose their arrows, and then Croker fucks up in game term. He fumbles his next roll, and his arrows go everywhere. And so, but he's supposed to take this one wizard alive. So he runs up and just starts kicking her and beating on her, and but his goal there really is, he's not trying to do kung fu.
Right.
He's not in a brawl. He's just trying to keep her from responding.
Right.
He's trying to keep her from getting her shit together enough to hit him with the spell. Okay. So the first version of Gambit was just its own action that I called Thrash, which was just, you're up in somebody's face. Instead of attacking them, you make a strength roll, and if you succeed, they lose their next action. And it was dead simple,
Okay.
and it was just a way to sort of reflect. You may not be able to defeat this foe, but you can keep them busy until somebody can come help you, right? So the Gambit action, that's the heart of it, right? And then there were a few other options that I sort of spliced in there because it felt like one way to reflect a bunch of different possibilities. Right. But that was the heart of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it here.
You roll a skill that's not an attack, that's not your weapon skill,
right.
And you get a result that's not, I stab him with my knife.
Yeah. The examples: animals to ride a target down, insight to motivate or infuriate, strength to knock a target down. And you give some examples here: interfere, wrestle, disarm, prepare, and whatnot. Which something I'll ask you later, but it's the which I found within this game to be a pleasant surprise that I really wasn't looking for. It just kind of caught me. But reading through, now this is a playtest, of course, but reading through a lot of the rules itself. There's an openness to the narrative aspects of the game. A lot of times it's, here's some examples or whatever you want to make up, and which is I never considered Delta Green to be locked down. Like you need to follow these rules in order to have a Delta Green experience. There is room to maneuver. But there is still a different style towards the rule structure here. And there's no shortage of rules and system design here, but it is presented with, or, do what thou wilt. And, within the aspect of the game itself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tricky balancing act because, you have to make the rules and the results specific enough, right, and concrete, so that players who've never read this shit before can read it and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. Right. But you also want to leave, you want to give people permission to, once they wrap their heads around it, to get creative and not feel constrained.
Right.
And you want to make sure you communicate to people that we all know that this kind of game depends on creativity, and players are going to come up with things that the rules don't envision.
Right.
And we don't want you to feel like the game's about to break down because of a choice you made, right? So you want it to be concrete enough to give you the, the bones, to give you the ability to um, um, come up with the
Mm-hmm.
results, right? And to serve as examples and inspiration if you just want to make something up on your
Yeah.
own, so that you have the confidence that you can make something up on your own without the experience veering instantly off into a direction that the rest of the rules weren't really meant for. So that's the goal there, is to sort of thread that all those needles at the same time.